What if the most terrifying train rides on Earth are not the fastest ones, but the ones where a single mistake leaves no room to recover? Some railways do not need speed to feel dangerous. They only need a track too close to people, a bridge too high above the ground, a desert too empty to escape, or a mountain slope where the train seems to be holding on by force. These are not ordinary journeys. They are routes where steel is pushed into places that feel too crowded, too remote, too steep, or too fragile for comfort. Some trains carry workers and travelers. Others carry minerals, history, and the weight of old engineering. But all of them pass through landscapes where beauty and danger are never far apart. What makes these railways unforgettable is not just the fear. It is the question behind them. Why did people build tracks here in the first place? And why do some of these trains still keep moving? This is a journey through some of the most dangerous and unbelievable railways on Earth, where every turn, bridge, tunnel, and stretch of track carries a story of risk, ambition, and survival. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden, dangerous, and unbelievable side of our world, make sure to subscribe, because this journey is only the beginning. Bangladesh Bishwa Ijtema Special Train. From a distance, this train no longer looks like a train. It looks like a moving wall of people leaving Tongi after Bishwa Ijtema, one of the largest Muslim gatherings in Bangladesh. The roof is packed. The doors vanish behind the crowd. Men cling to the sides of the carriages, holding on to metal bars and window frames as the train slowly pulls away. For several days, huge crowds gather near the Tarag River to pray, listen to sermons, and join the final prayer before returning home. But when the event ends, that massive crowd moves straight toward the railway stations. The platforms fill up quickly. The carriages run out of space. And when there is nowhere left inside, people climb onto the roof or hang from the outside, turning a journey home into something much more dangerous. A low branch, a signal post, a sudden movement, or one slip from the roof can become fatal within seconds. There is no barrier, no safe seat, and almost nothing between the passenger and the world rushing past. What makes this scene heavy is that most people are not chasing danger. They are simply trying to get home. When too many people are pushed into too little space, safety begins to feel like a luxury. This is why the Bishwa Ijtema Special Train feels so different. There is no cliff, no desert, and no mountain storm. The danger comes from the crowd itself. At that point, the train stops feeling like transportation. It becomes a test of balance, patience, and luck. Vietnam, Hanoi Train Street. In Hanoi, the danger does not come from a cliff, a desert, or a mountain pass. It comes from how close the railway sits to ordinary life. Hanoi Train Street cuts through a narrow neighborhood where houses, cafes, tables, chairs, and camera phones stand only a few steps from the tracks. In most places, a railway feels separate from the city. Here, it feels like it passes straight through someone's front yard. When a train is about to arrive, the whole street has to change in seconds. Cafe owners pull chairs back, move tables away, and warn visitors to stay inside the safe area. Then the train comes through, filling the alley with noise, wind, heat, and vibration. For tourists, that moment feels unreal. A train passing so close to your face is exactly the kind of scene people want to film. But the same thing that made this place famous also made it dangerous. There is almost no room for mistakes. One careless step, one person leaning out for a better photo, or one child moving too close to the rail can turn a few seconds of excitement into something far more serious. That is why the area has been controlled more carefully over time. The cafes may still open, and the street still keeps its unusual charm. but trains no longer pass through as freely or as often as before. The rhythm has changed because the risk became too clear to ignore. What makes Hanoi train streets so strange is the contrast. It looks warm, colorful, and full of life, yet its fame comes from a line of steel that was never meant to become a tourist stage. Here, the railway is frightening because it became too familiar. People drink coffee beside it, take photos beside it, and sometimes forget that the track running through the street still belongs to a moving train. Thailand, Maeklong Railway Market. In Thailand, there is a market where the train passes so close that the whole place has to move before it arrives. Maeklong Railway Market sits in Samut Songkhram, not far from Bangkok. At first, it looks like a normal local market, with seafood, fruit, vegetables, snacks, and daily goods packed tightly along both sides of the railway. Then the warning comes. Within seconds, vendors pull baskets away from the rails, slide tables inward, and fold their umbrellas just enough for the train to pass. The track that was almost hidden beneath daily life suddenly becomes clear again. When the train enters, there is barely any space left. It moves closely, but close enough to make everyone step back. Tourists press themselves to the side, while vendors stand calmly beside their goods, watching the train cut through the middle of the market. And as soon as it is gone, everything returns. The awnings open again. Goods are pushed back into place. People step into the narrow walkway, and the market continues almost as if nothing happened. That is what makes Maeklong so strange. The danger here does not come from a cliff, a storm, or an old bridge. It comes from repetition. Because the train passes again and again, something risky begins to feel normal. For the vendors, this is part of the working day. For tourists, it is a rare scene to film. But no matter how familiar it becomes, a railway track is still a railway track. Maeklong Railway Market is frightening because it shows how close ordinary life can stand beside danger, until even the sound of an approaching train becomes part of the market rhythm. Mauritania, iron ore train. After the crowded streets and markets, the journey enters a different kind of danger. No cafes. No vendors. No houses beside the tracks. Only desert. Mauritania's iron ore train was not built for passengers. Its real job is to carry iron ore from the mines of Sahara to the port of Nouadhibou, across hundreds of kilometers of the Sahara. From far away, it looks like a black industrial line moving through an empty world. The train can stretch for kilometers, pulling hundreds of heavy wagons loaded with ore. Sometimes the end disappears into dust while the front keeps dragging forward across the sand. What makes it unusual is that people have still found ways to ride it. Some use a passenger carriage when available. Others ride in the open ore wagons, exposed to the desert from the beginning to the end. There is no comfort in that kind of journey. No soft seat. No clean window. And almost no shelter. During the day, the heat can be brutal. At night, the cold can cut sharply. Wind pushes iron dust into clothes, eyes, and lungs until the ride becomes a test of endurance. This train feels different from the ones before it. In Bangladesh or Thailand, danger came from crowds and narrow spaces. Here, it comes from distance, dust, and emptiness. No city lights around you. No easy exit. No place to step off and feel safe. Just metal, ore, wind, and a desert that seems endless. Mauritania's iron ore train is frightening because it was never meant to be gentle. It is a freight machine crossing one of the harshest landscapes on Earth, and anyone who rides it is entering the desert on the desert's terms. Chile, Bolivia, have through the Atacama Desert. After Mauritania, the desert does not disappear. It only changes color. The FECAB Railway runs through northern Chile, crossing the Atacama, one of the driest landscapes on Earth. Here, the ground turns red, brown, and pale white under a sky that often feels too empty. From the train line, the world can look less like a country and more like the surface of another planet. This is not a railway built for scenic comfort. Its main role is industrial. The line connects mining areas with the port of Antofagasta, carrying minerals, copper, lithium-related cargo, chemicals, and heavy freight, through a place where ordinary life almost vanishes from view. Along parts of the route, the silence is what makes it unsettling. Old stations sit in the dust. Empty land stretches for miles. There are no crowded platforms, no villages pressed against the tracks, and almost no sign that anyone could live comfortably here. But the train keeps moving. That is what makes FCAB feel so strange. It passes through a land that looks dead, yet it carries materials connected to some of the most modern industries in the world. Batteries, electric vehicles, copper networks, and global supply chains all depend on places like this, even if most people never see the railway behind them. The danger here is not loud. It is dry, slow, and lonely. Heat, dust, altitude, isolation, and long empty distances turn the railway into something more than transport. It becomes a thin industrial line drawn across a desert that barely seems willing to let anything survive. FCAB is frightening because it shows a different face of danger. Not a sudden fall, not a crowd, not a storm, but a feeling that the train is crossing a world where nature has stripped everything down to rock, salt, dust, and silence. China, Hotan-Rucheng Railway. In western China, the danger is not just the desert. It is the fact that the desert moves. The Hotan-Rucheng Railway runs along the southern edge of the Atacama Desert, one of the harshest sand deserts on Earth. This is a place of heat, wind, dust, and shifting dunes, where the ground itself never feels completely still. Unlike an ordinary railway, this line had to be built against sand from the beginning. Long sections are protected by grass grids, planted shrubs, and raised bridges designed to let sandstorms pass underneath instead of burying the track. From the window, the journey can look strangely smooth. The train moves forward across open land, while outside, the desert stretches in every direction. But that calm surface hides a constant fight. Every dune, every gust of wind, every layer of drifting sand is trying to take back the space the railway has claimed. That is what makes this route feel different. The danger is not a single dramatic moment. It is pressure that never stops. The desert does not need to break the train in 1 second. It only needs time, wind, and enough sand. And still, the railway keeps going. Hotan-Rucheng is frightening because it feels like a thin line of human control drawn across a landscape that refuses to stay fixed. The train may look modern and steady, but outside the window is a world that can change shape overnight. Here, the railway is not just crossing the desert. It is holding its place against it. Russia Lake Baskunchak Salt Train. After sand and dust, the journey enters a whiter kind of emptiness. Salt. Russia's Lake Baskunchak is not just a lake. It is a giant salt field, where the ground, the water, and even the air seem to carry the same sharp mineral taste. From a distance, the landscape can look calm and almost beautiful. But for metal, this place is brutal. The trains here are not built for passengers or scenery. They belong to the work of salt extraction. Their job is to move through a harsh mineral environment where rails, wheels, and machinery are constantly exposed to salt, moisture, and corrosion. That is what makes this railway feel so strange. In most places, a train fights gravity, cliffs, storms, or distance. Here, it fights chemistry. Salt creeps onto everything. It stains the wheels, coats the metal, and slowly attacks the parts that keep the train alive. A railway is supposed to be made of strength, but in a place like this, even steel begins to look fragile. The danger is not fast. It does not arrive in one dramatic second. It works quietly, layer by layer, turning equipment rusty, rough, and tired. The train keeps moving, but the lake is always working against it. Lake Baskinchak Salt Train is frightening because it shows a slower kind of destruction. Not a crash, not a fall, not a storm, but a landscape that eats machines little by little. Here, the railway does not just pass through nature. It is being worn down by it every day. China, Chaka Salt Lake Railway. Not every dangerous railway looks dark or violent. Some look almost peaceful. Chaka Salt Lake in Qinghai is often called the mirror of the sky, because when a thin layer of water covers the salt flat, the whole world seems to reflect beneath your feet. The sky, the clouds, the distant mountains, and the railway all appear to float inside the same white-blue silence. The railway here was first connected to salt extraction. Today, parts of it are also used for tourist trains, carrying visitors into the middle of a landscape that feels more like a dream than a working salt lake. But this beauty is not soft. The white ground is salt. The shining surface is mineral water. And the same thing that makes the lake look unreal can also damage metal, equipment, and anything left exposed for too long. That is what makes Chaka feel different from the other railways in this group. Mauritania is harsh because of dust. Atacama is harsh because of dryness. Hotan Rochang is harsh because the sand moves. But Chaka is dangerous in a quieter way. It does not attack with noise. It reflects, blinds, corrodes, and hides its harshness behind beauty. From the train, the view can feel endless, as if the track is running across the sky itself. Yet underneath that mirror is a salt lake, a place shaped by dryness, minerals, high-altitude air, and a landscape that is far less gentle than it looks. Chaka Salt Lake Railway is frightening because it reminds us that danger does not always need to look ugly. Sometimes, it comes dressed as beauty, bright enough to make people forget what they are standing on. United States Great Salt Lake Causeway. Some railways cross mountains. This one cuts across a lake. The Great Salt Lake Causeway in Utah carries freight trains over one of the strangest bodies of water in the United States. From above, it can look like a long, straight scar drawn across the lake, separating two worlds of different color and salinity. On one side, the water can appear blue-green. On the other, it can shift toward pink, red, or purple, shaped by salt levels, microbes, and the way the causeway limits the movement of water between the lake's two arms. The railway was built for efficiency. It shortened the route and gave heavy freight trains a direct path across the lake instead of forcing them around it. But the price of that shortcut was a permanent change to the lake itself. This is what makes the Great Salt Lake Causeway feel different from the railways before it. The danger is not only about the train, it is about the mark the railway leaves behind. The causeway sits on rock and earth, holding a line across water, mud, salt, and shifting lake levels. Trains still cross it, but below them is a fragile system where small changes in flow can affect salinity, wildlife, minerals, and the colors that make the lake so unreal. There is something unsettling about that. A railway usually feels like a path through a landscape. Here, it feels like the landscape was forced to change shape around the railway. Great Salt Lake Causeway is frightening in a quieter way. Not because the train seems about to fall, but because it shows how one straight line of steel and stone can divide a natural world for generations. China, Tian Shan Canyon Kuka section. After the deserts and salt lakes, the railway enters a place where the danger rises upward. Red cliffs, narrow canyon walls, stone hanging above the track. The Kucha section near the Tian Shan Mountains is known for its dramatic red sandstone landscape, where the rock looks solid from a distance, but feels unstable the closer you imagine a train passing through it. This is not the empty danger of a desert. This is a tighter kind of fear, where the railway seems trapped between the mountain and the drop beside it. The cliffs here are shaped by wind, water, heat, and time. Their color makes the landscape look almost unreal, but beauty does not make the rock harmless. In a canyon, every vibration matters. A heavy freight train does not just pass through quietly. It shakes the ground, pushes sound into the walls, and reminds you that the mountain is not a fixed thing. A small rockfall may not look dramatic from far away, but on a railway, even a small piece of stone can become serious. The track does not have much room to forgive mistakes. One side is hard rock. The other side opens into the canyon. Once the train enters this section, it can only keep moving forward. That is what makes this route feel tense. The danger is not only below the train. It is above it, beside it, and sometimes hidden inside the cliff itself. In places like this, the railway feels less like a line built through nature and more like a narrow agreement with the mountain. The train is allowed to pass, but only as long as the rock stays still. China, Daju Cliffside train. Some railways cross mountains. This one seems to hang from them. The Daju Cliffside train runs along a steep mountain wall, where the track clings to the edge instead of resting on open ground. From inside the carriage, the view can feel unreal. One side is rock. The other side drops away into empty space. This is not the wide fear of a desert. It is a narrow, trapped kind of fear. The train moves smoothly, but the setting around it does not feel gentle. The cliff rises almost straight beside the track, while clouds and fog can cover the valley in minutes. When the mist rolls in, the journey becomes even stranger. The ground disappears first. Then the distance disappears. What remains is the train, the cliff, and a white emptiness outside the window. That is what makes this route tense. The danger is not always visible. Sometimes it is hidden by fog, height, and the feeling that there is no room to escape once the train has entered the cliffside section. Even though the train is electric and designed to run smoothly, the mind still reacts to the place around it. A smooth ride does not erase the drop below. It only makes the contrast sharper. Daju Cliffside train is frightening because it turns a mountain view into a test of nerve. The train may move calmly, but the landscape keeps reminding you that calm and safety are not always the same thing. United States, Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. In Colorado, the fear does not come from a modern train hanging in fog. It comes from an old railway that still runs along the edge of the mountains. The Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad follows the Animas River through the San Juan Mountains, using a narrow track that dates back to the mining days of the American West. It was built in the 1880s to move people, supplies, silver, and gold through terrain that was never easy to cross. Today, it has become a famous scenic railway. But the landscape has not become gentle, just because tourists now ride it. On some sections, the train moves along shelves cut into steep rock, with the river far below and the mountain wall rising beside it. From the window, the ground can seem to disappear. You see stone, water, trees, and empty air, but very little space for error. The train itself adds to the feeling. Historic locomotives are heavy, loud, and physical. You hear the wheels, feel the vibration, and sense the weight of old steel working through a narrow mountain corridor. That is what makes this route different. It is beautiful, but not polished. It still carries the rough feeling of the time that created it, when railways were pushed into wild places because mining towns needed a lifeline. Durango and Silverton is frightening because it does not feel fully separated from the past. The train may be a tourist experience now, but the cliffs, the narrow ledges, and the drop toward the Animas River still remind you why this route was never ordinary. Brazil, Curitiba Railway. In Brazil, the mountain does not open easily. The Curitiba Railway cuts through the Serra do Mar, linking the highlands near Curitiba with the coast near Paranaguá. It passes through dense Atlantic rainforest, steep slopes, tunnels, bridges, and wet cliffs, where the land often feels too unstable for a railway. This is not the dry danger of a desert or the clean edge of a canyon. Here, everything is heavy with moisture. Rain darkens the rock. Forest covers the slopes. Clouds sit low over the mountains, and the track seems to slip in and out of tunnels carved through stone. When the line was built in the 19th century, the challenge was enormous. Workers had to push rails through a landscape of cliffs, ravines, and constant rain. Every bridge and tunnel was a fight against the mountain, not just a piece of engineering. Even today, the route still carries that feeling. A train may move slowly through the forest, but outside the window, the terrain looks alive and difficult to trust. Water, roots, mud, and loose rock all work quietly against the line. That is what makes Curitiba Railway unsettling. The danger does not come from one empty drop alone. It comes from the whole environment pressing in at once. The forest, the rain, the cliffs, and the tunnels all make the railway feel like something forced through a place that never wanted to be crossed. Curitiba Railway is frightening because it reminds you that some routes were not simply built through nature. They were carved into it, meter by meter, at a cost that the scenery can easily hide. United States-Canada, White Pass and Yukon Route. In Alaska, this railway was born from a rush for gold. The White Pass and Yukon Route begins in Chagwe and climbs toward the mountains that once stood between thousands of prospectors and the Klondike gold fields. It was not built slowly, with comfort in mind. It was built in a hurry, at the edge of a dream that pulled people north with the promise of fortune. The train crosses a landscape of steep rock, cold wind, deep gorges, and old bridges pressed against the mountain. From the window, the route can feel beautiful at first, until the track bends, and the ground seems to fall away beneath the carriage. What makes this railway different is the history behind the view. The cliffs are not just scenery. They are part of a route once tied to exhaustion, risk, and the desperate hope of reaching gold before someone else did. As the train climbs, the air feels sharper. The mountains close in. Steel bridges appear over empty drops, and old timber structures remind you how bold this project must have looked more than a century ago. Today, the route is famous for its scenery, but the fear has not completely disappeared. It still lives in the narrow ledges, the cold passes, and the feeling that this railway was built through a place that did not make the journey easy for anyone. White Pass and Yukon Route is frightening because it carries more than passengers. It carries the memory of a time when people crossed dangerous mountains not for adventure, but because they believed gold was waiting on the other side. Argentina, train to the clouds. Some bridges make a train cross a gap. This one makes it feel as if the train has left the ground completely. Argentina's train to the clouds climbs into the high Andes of Salta, where the air becomes thin, and the landscape opens into a wide, empty plateau. The most famous moment comes at La Polvorilla Viaduct, a steel bridge standing more than 13,000 feet above sea level. At that height, the danger is not only outside the window, it is also in the body. Breathing can feel heavier. A small headache can appear without warning. That is why the train carries medical support and oxygen, because the altitude itself becomes part of the journey. When the train reaches the viaduct, everything slows down. Below is a deep canyon. Around it is open sky. The steel structure stretches across the emptiness, and for a moment, the carriage seems to float instead of roll. This is what makes Train to the Clouds different. It is not frightening because it looks broken or unstable. It is frightening because it rises so high that the ground begins to feel distant, almost irrelevant. The bridge is an engineering achievement, but from inside the train, it feels more personal than that. You are not just looking at altitude. You are sitting inside it. Train to the Clouds is beautiful because it reaches a place few railways can touch. But that same beauty carries a strange pressure, as if the train is moving through a thin space between the mountains and the sky. Myanmar Goktaek Viaduct. In Myanmar, trains once crossed a bridge that seemed too thin for the space beneath it. Goktaek Viaduct stood above a deep gorge in Shan State, carrying the railway between the mountain towns of Pien U Lawin and Lashio. From a distance, it looked like a steel skeleton stretched across the valley, light in appearance but heavy with history. The bridge was built more than a century ago, during the colonial period, when engineers were pushing railways into places where the land offered no easy path. Its steel towers rose from the gorge like a fragile frame, holding the track in the air. What made the crossing so tense was the speed. The train did not rush over it. It crawled, slowly, carefully, almost respectfully. Every wheel movement felt measured, as if the bridge and the train were trying not to disturb each other too much. From inside the carriage, the view could be beautiful and uncomfortable at the same time. The track disappeared beneath the train. The gorge opened below. Mist, forest, rock, and empty space filled the window, making the carriage feel as if it was floating rather than crossing. That is why Goktaek Viaduct never felt like an ordinary bridge. It was not only a structure connecting two sides of a valley. It was a moment where passengers could feel the age of steel, the depth below, and the silence around the train. Switzerland, Landwasser Viaduct. Some railway bridges frighten people because they look fragile. Landwasser Viaduct does something different. It looks almost too perfect. In the Swiss canton of Graubünden, this stone bridge curves across the Landwasser Valley, before disappearing straight into a tunnel carved into the rock. From a distance, the red train looks small against the mountains, sliding over 6 tall arches as if the bridge were part of the landscape itself. But that beauty is exactly what makes the moment feel strange. The train does not cross a simple straight bridge. It bends through the air, high above the valley, then heads directly into a dark opening in the cliff. For a few seconds, the carriages seem to chase each other around the curve, before the whole train is swallowed by the mountain. Unlike some dangerous railways, Landwasser does not feel rough or chaotic. It feels controlled, elegant, and almost calm. Yet the height is still there. The empty space is still below. and the curve still reminds you that the train is moving across a narrow stone path suspended above the valley. That contrast is what makes this viaduct unforgettable. It is not terrifying because it looks weak. It is unsettling because it is so beautiful that the danger becomes easy to overlook. Landwasser Viaduct feels like a bridge between two worlds. The open valley on one side, the dark mountain tunnel on the other, and a train passing through the air for just a few breathless seconds. China, Renziqiao Railway Bridge. Some bridges rise from the ground. Renziqiao seems to hang between two cliffs. Also known as the Inverted V Bridge, this railway bridge in Yunnan crosses a deep gorge with a shape that resembles the Chinese character for person. Instead of standing on tall columns from below, the structure is anchored into the rock on both sides, as if the mountain itself is holding the bridge in place. That is what makes it feel so unusual. The train does not simply pass over a river or valley. It passes across a steel frame balanced between two rock faces, with empty space underneath and tunnel mouths waiting at both ends. Built more than a century ago on the old Kunming-Haiphong railway route, the bridge carries the mark of French engineering from that period. Its metal members, rivets, and triangular form make it look less like a modern railway bridge and more like a machine suspended in the canyon. The danger here is not only height. It is the feeling that the whole structure depends on two cliffs agreeing to hold it. No heavy forest hides the drop. No wide deck makes it feel comfortable. The bridge is narrow, exposed, and direct. Renziqiao is frightening because it does not try to soften the crossing. It shows the gap, the steel, the rock, and the risk almost honestly. For a few seconds, the train is no longer on ordinary ground. It is moving across a piece of old engineering stretched between stone walls, where the mountain is not just scenery, but part of the bridge itself. Beipanjiang Railway Bridge. Some bridges look high. Beipanjiang Railway Bridge feels like it was built above a wound in the earth. The bridge crosses the Beipan River in Guizhou, where the land drops into a deep canyon with steep rock walls on both sides. From a distance, the railway looks almost unreal, a thin line stretched across a massive opening in the mountains. When it opened in 2001, this bridge became one of the highest railway bridges in the world. Its deck stands hundreds of feet above the river, high enough to make a train look small against the gorge below. But this bridge was not built only to impress people. It was built to solve a problem. In a region where mountains and canyons can turn short distances into long, difficult journeys, the bridge gave freight trains a faster way across the landscape. That is what makes Beipanjiang different from a scenic bridge. Its height is dramatic, but its purpose is practical. It carries heavy transport through a place where the ground itself seems broken. The danger here is clean and simple. There is the train, there is the bridge, and far below, there is the canyon. No matter how strong the structure is, the view still changes the way the body feels. The empty space beneath the track makes every crossing seem suspended between engineering and gravity. England Ribblehead Viaduct. Ribblehead Viaduct does not look like a bridge trying to shock you. It looks patient. Standing in the open landscape of North Yorkshire, it carries the Settle Carlisle Railway across Batty Moss with 24 stone arches stretching through wind, rain, and empty moorland. There is no dramatic canyon below it, but the place still feels exposed. The sky is wide. The ground is wet. The wind has room to hit the structure from every side. What makes Ribblehead different is the weight behind its beauty. This was not a bridge built in comfort. During the Victorian Railway age, workers came here to build across a cold, remote landscape where even the foundations were difficult. Temporary settlements rose near the site, and the people who built the viaduct lived through hard weather, illness, accidents, and long days of physical labor. From a distance, the arches look calm and almost elegant, but each one carries the memory of that work. Stone, brick, mud, wind, and human effort are all hidden inside the shape of the bridge. That is why Ribblehead feels heavier than it first appears. It is not frightening because the train seems about to fall. It is frightening because it reminds you how much suffering can be buried inside something beautiful. Today, trains still cross the viaducts smoothly, turning it into one of the most iconic sights in the Yorkshire Dales. But beneath that quiet image is a harder story, a railway built through weather, isolation, and sacrifice. Chile, Malleco Viaduct. Malleco Viaduct does not look like a bridge quietly crossing a valley. It looks like a giant steel frame holding the railway in the air. Located near Collipulli in Chile's Araucanía region, the viaduct stretches across the Malleco River Valley, with tall steel towers rising from the forest below. Beside it, a modern highway now runs across the same landscape, but the old railway bridge still carries the stronger sense of risk. When it opened in 1890, Malleco Viaduct was one of the most impressive engineering works in South America. Its steel structure was built for a time when crossing a deep valley by rail was not just a transport problem, but a national statement of progress. What makes the bridge unsettling is its openness. There are no stone arches wrapping around the train, no mountain wall beside the track, and no sense of shelter. The train moves across rock's narrow steel skeleton, with trees far below and open air surrounding the rails. The height is not only something you see, it is something the body feels. Even if the bridge is strong, the space underneath changes the entire crossing. A normal railway suddenly becomes a suspended path above a valley. Malleco Viaduct is frightening because it carries the confidence of old engineering in a very exposed form. It shows the ambition of country trying to push railways across difficult land, but it also reminds you how bold that ambition had to be. Here, the train does not simply pass over a river. It crosses a piece of history, held high above the forest by steel, wind, and more than a century of human trust. Switzerland, Gorge-spanning Railway. In Switzerland, the danger does not always look violent. Sometimes it looks clean, white, and perfectly silent. The Gorge-spanning Railway climbs from Zermatt into the high Alps, rising toward one of the most famous viewpoints of the Matterhorn. It is known as Europe's highest open-air cog railway, carrying passengers up to more than 3,000 meters above sea level. At first, the journey can feel peaceful. The train leaves the village behind, passes forests and mountain slopes, then slowly enters a world of snow, rock, glaciers, and thin air. But the higher it climbs, the more the landscape changes. Weather in the Alps does not need much time to turn. Clear sky can become fog. A bright view can disappear behind snow. Wind can sweep across the track, and the whole mountain can feel colder and sharper within minutes. That is why the cog system matters. An ordinary train could not simply grip this climb with smooth wheels alone. The railway needs teeth, steel, and careful control to keep moving upward through slopes where gravity is always pulling back. What makes Gorge-spanning strange is the calmness of it. The train moves steadily, almost politely, while outside the window the mountain reminds you how powerful it is. There is no dramatic cliff edge in every second, but there is altitude, cold, snow, and a feeling that the railway is working hard, even when it looks effortless. Conclusion: these railways are not dangerous in the same way. Some are frightening because too many people are forced into too little space. Some run through markets, neighborhoods, and places where daily life stands only a few steps from the track. Others cross deserts, salt lakes, cliffs, forests, old bridges, and mountains where the land itself seems to resist the idea of a railway. But they all reveal the same thing. A railway is never just two lines of steel. It can be a lifeline for people trying to get home. It can be a machine built to pull minerals out of the desert. It can be a scar across a lake, a bridge hanging above a valley, or a red train climbing slowly into the snow. In some places, it shows the confidence of old engineering. In others, it shows how far people are willing to go when distance, poverty, trade, faith, or survival leaves them no easy choice. What makes these routes so powerful is not only the risk. It is the contrast around them. Beauty and fear often appear in the same frame. A peaceful mountain view can hide a brutal drop. A quiet salt lake can slowly destroy metal. A market full of life can still be divided by an approaching train. That is why these railways stay in the mind. They remind us that human progress has never been clean or simple. Every track built through impossible terrain carries a story of ambition, pressure, danger, and trust. Trust in steel. Trust in workers. Trust in the driver. Trust that the mountain, the bridge, the desert, or the crowd will allow one more journey to pass. And maybe that is the real reason these trains feel so unforgettable. They are not just moving across the world. They are moving along the thin line between courage and risk, between beauty and fear, between what humans build and what nature never fully gives up.